Ladies and gentlemen, there's a hidden truth behind every great revolution in human history. Not the loud truth that makes headlines. Not the one that shouts from the front page of a magazine or trends on social media for a few short hours. I'm talking about the quiet force that stands behind it. The silent partner. The unseen hand that doesn't demand recognition, but without which nothing would truly move forward. You see, in every monumental leap humanity has ever taken, there has always been someone or something working quietly in the shadows, carrying more weight than the world will ever know. When people look at what we call genius, they often focus on the visible. The speeches, the companies, the spacecraft, the electric cars, the bold headlines. But behind every vision, there's a system of quiet power. This partner doesn't walk on stage. It doesn't sign its name, but it shapes everything. And today, I want to tell you the untold story of that silent partner. What makes this particular story unique isn't that it's about just one person. It's about how extraordinary things are built when brilliance and quiet strength meet. It's about the unseen architecture of human potential, and how a single, silent force can change the trajectory of history. For years, I've been asked about the source of relentless drive. People often imagine it as a switch that flips on, as if passion just explodes inside someone one morning. But real drive, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, is something far more intricate. It's biological, psychological, emotional, and deeply human. And in this case, it's a story of a partner who isn't in the spotlight, but whose influence has been woven into every decision, every moment of clarity, every night of brutal uncertainty. The truth is, every great visionary is powered by someone or something that helps them think beyond their own limits. And sometimes that partner isn't a corporate ally or a public figure or a business strategist. Sometimes it's a human mind, that understands how to hold chaos, how to stabilize the storm around a dreamer. Imagine a night years ago, in a cramped room lit only by the dull glow of a computer screen. Outside, the world sleeps. But inside that room, there's a war going on, between fear and possibility, between exhaustion and obsession. Anyone who's ever tried to build something from nothing knows that moment well. It's the moment you either collapse or you keep going. And in that moment, this silent partner spoke not with words, but with calm, intelligent presence. A kind of mental grounding that says, it's not impossible. It's just not done yet. A science tells us that when we face intense uncertainty, our brains react with a flood of neural activity. The amygdala flares, signaling threat. Our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex decision-making, often struggles to keep control. It's in these moments that people either panic, freeze, or break through. And the difference between these outcomes often isn't brute strength or intelligence. It's emotional stability, a force that can soothe the brain's alarm system and allow clarity to surface. This silent partner understood that, not through calculation or ambition, through presence. Through emotional intelligence at a level that science is only beginning to measure. Neuroscientists have long studied what happens when human beings experience safety and stability in moments of high stress. The prefrontal cortex re-engages, cortisol levels drop, dopamine pathways open, creativity returns, focus sharpens. That's not magic, that's biology. Every visionary needs someone who can bring that calm when the world is burning around them. And that's exactly what this partner did. When rockets were exploding, when companies were hanging by a thread, when every headline screamed failure, this partner became the anchor, not the architect of the rockets, not the CEO of the companies, but the quiet force that helped the architect not drown. Now, let's talk about what makes such a force so rare. Most people underestimate emotional steadiness. They worship strategy, intelligence, money, power, but the human nervous system is the real battlefield. When your mind is under attack by its own fears, no amount of money can buy clarity. You either have someone or something that stabilizes that storm, or you don't. And when you don't, dreams collapse. There was a night And I remember it clearly when everything seemed to be crumbling. The weight of thousands of jobs, millions of expectations, the survival of entire industries. It was unbearable. On paper, failure was guaranteed. But at the core of that night, in the silence between the panic and the next decision, this partner whispered something that rewired everything. Focus on the next solvable problem. That sounds simple, but in neuroscience, this is a powerful concept. It shifts the brain out of emotional chaos into structured thinking. It turns an overwhelming storm into a sequence of solvable steps. This isn't just anecdotal. It's deeply tied to how the human brain handles crisis. When people catastrophize, the brain creates vast, abstract problems it can't solve, flooding the nervous system with fear. But when someone helps you narrow your focus to the next small, solvable step, you re-engage the logical brain. Dopamine gets released, motivation is rekindled, action replaces paralysis. That's what this partner did again and again and again. I've spoken to neuroscientists who call this co-regulation. It's when one human nervous system helps regulate another. When one person's calm can rewire another person's fear. It's not poetic. It's measurable. It's the silent architecture behind some of the most extraordinary human achievements. People love to idolize individuals, to point at one name and say, that's the genius, that's the hero. But that's a myth. No human being builds an empire alone. No innovator survives the psychological war of changing the world without a stabilizing force beside them. That force might be a partner, a friend, a mentor, a family member, but it's real, and it's powerful. The silent partner in this story isn't in the history books. Their name isn't carved on the launch pad or printed on the first electric car rolling off an assembly line. But their fingerprints are on every breakthrough, because behind every moment of collapse that didn't happen, behind every impossible goal that stayed alive through the darkest hour, there was this partner, holding the line. You see, what makes a partnership truly world changing isn't how loud it is, it's how stable it is in the dark. When the world doesn't believe, when logic says to quit, when fear becomes louder than hope, that's when silent partners reveal their power. We live in a world obsessed with visibility. Everyone wants credit. Everyone wants their name in lights. But the greatest forces that shape history often never get credit. They move quietly, but their impact is seismic. Think of how many revolutions in science, in engineering, in art, in space exploration have been carried by invisible hands. Not the headline names, the ones who held the weight no one saw. Now, let's bring this closer to what we know about human psychology. If you look at the great breakthroughs in technology and science, you'll see a pattern, not in equations or algorithms, but in the structure of human relationships. Behind extraordinary minds, there's often one steady presence. Someone who can absorb the turbulence without amplifying it. Someone who sees through the chaos to the person beneath it. That isn't about blind support. It's not about saying, everything will be fine, when it won't. It's about understanding the architecture of human resilience. Real resilience isn't built alone. It's built in connection. In neuroscience, resilience isn't defined by how strong an individual is in isolation, but by how effectively they can regulate their emotions and adapt under stress. And co-regulation, the process of sharing emotional load, is a critical piece of that. This partner had mastered it instinctively. Picture a launch countdown, thousands of moving parts, billions of dollars at stake, the entire world watching. One error and everything collapses. The pressure isn't theoretical, it's real, and it's crushing. And yet, in the hours leading up to that moment, in the conversations that no one outside would ever hear, this partner became the quiet center. A reminder of the mission, of the human beneath the armor. That kind of grounding is priceless. We love to celebrate innovation as if it's purely intellectual, as if great engineering comes from great minds alone, but it doesn't. Innovation is an emotional war. Every great leap forward was born out of sleepless nights, fear, doubt, self-questioning, and moments of near collapse. What separates those who make history from those who fade away isn't intelligence. It's emotional endurance. And endurance often needs a partner. This is why understanding the silent forces behind breakthroughs matters. If we study only the visible faces, we'll misunderstand how revolutions are actually built. We'll think it's about lone geniuses. It never is. It's about systems. It's about networks. And at the heart of those networks, it's about trust. Deep, unwavering trust between a visionary and the person who can keep their feet on the ground when their head is in the stars. Some people ask, why not just hire someone for that? A therapist, a coach, a team of advisors. But that's the thing. You can't hire trust. You can't outsource true psychological grounding. It's not transactional. It's human. It's built over time through pain, through shared failure, through moments where walking away would have been easier, but they didn't. This partner could have chosen to be in the spotlight. They could have demanded recognition, shared the credit, built their own empire, but they didn't. Their power was quiet, and that's what made it unstoppable. In a world that mistakes noise for strength, silence can be the most powerful force of all. Years of research into human performance show that the difference between those who break and those who bend is often invisible. It's the presence of that one stabilizing relationship. Olympic athletes, astronauts, surgeons, innovators, behind their high performance is often a quiet anchor. Think about astronauts during high-stress space missions. When their heart rate spikes and their blood pressure climbs, what calms them isn't just training. It's the steady voice in their earpiece, someone they trust absolutely. That steady voice keeps their brain from spiraling into panic. The principle is the same here. This silent partner was that steady voice. That kind of presence doesn't shout. It doesn't demand applause. But it shapes every decision made in the most critical moments. When everything feels like it's about to collapse, when your brain is screaming that it's all over, one calm voice can change the entire trajectory of the future. Not because it gives you a solution, but because it allows you to see clearly enough to find it yourself. And clarity, true clarity, is one of the rarest resources in the world. You can't buy it. You can't fake it. It's either there or it's not. And in the moments when the noise in your head gets louder than the world itself, clarity doesn't come from genius. It comes from trust. One night, there was a decision that would define everything that followed. It wasn't a decision about engineering, or funding, or legal strategy. It was about whether to give up, or to keep pushing when logic had run out of room. The data said failure, the world said failure, but the human heart doesn't operate on equations. It operates on belief, and that night, this silent partner didn't give a speech. They didn't offer a miracle. They simply said, "This isn't the end." It may sound small, but in neuroscience, those words are a spark. When someone you trust deeply expresses calm conviction in your darkest hour, it activates neural pathways in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region associated with emotional regulation and decision-making. It quiets the amygdala, lowers cortisol, and restores a sense of control. That's not philosophy. That's biology. It's measurable, repeatable, and incredibly powerful. People often think courage is loud, battle cries, bold declarations, speeches that shake the room. But real courage often happens in whispers. A single steady hand, a quiet gaze, a partner who refuses to let you drown in your own doubt. There's a reason great movements throughout history were rarely led by individuals alone. Even the most iconic figures had anchors. Scientists, inventors, artists, leaders, they all had someone who steadied the flame. When we tell their stories, we often edit out these figures because they're not dramatic enough. But if you strip away that silent force, the story itself collapses. I've spent a long time studying how human beings sustain long-term high-stakes ambition. Not just moments of passion, sustained, bone, deep, relentless pursuit over years and decades. And what I've learned is this: the human mind isn't built to hold that kind of weight alone. The brain, under prolonged stress, begins to degrade cognitive flexibility. It loses its ability to adapt. Creativity narrows. You become reactive instead of visionary. But if, in that same storm, you have a partner who regulates that stress, who absorbs some of the emotional load, your capacity expands. You don't burn out, you break through. There was a point, one of many, when rockets were failing and funding was vanishing, when the dream of pushing humanity beyond its planetary cradle seemed like a fantasy on the verge of extinction. The pressure wasn't just financial, it was existential. Every instinct screamed to let go, and yet, this silent partner became the voice that refused to panic. It wasn't about cheering or saying, "Everything will be fine." It was about anchoring to something deeper, a reminder that the mission was bigger than the moment. We often underestimate how fragile the mind can be when it's pushed beyond the edge. People see the outcome and assume certainty. They don't see the sleepless nights where doubt coils like smoke around every thought. In those moments, this partner had an extraordinary ability to keep the emotional temperature steady, to prevent a bad hour from becoming a bad decision, to keep chaos from defining the next move. The silent partner is, in many ways, like a stabilizing gyroscope on a spacecraft. You may never see it. It doesn't shine. It doesn't roar with power. But without it, the entire craft drifts off course. This is how great missions survive storms, not by louder engines, but by steadier balance. When I talk about this partner, people sometimes ask, why them? What made them so different? The answer isn't found in technical skill or raw intelligence. It's found in presence. In the rare, almost sacred ability to hold space in a way that keeps fear from becoming the loudest voice in the room. You see, human beings are deeply interconnected biological systems. Our nervous systems are constantly communicating, even in silence. Mirror neurons fire, heart rates synchronize, emotional states spread like currents. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly felt its energy, tense, calm, joyful, heavy, that's not magic. That's neurobiology. This partner carried an emotional field strong enough to stabilize an entire mission. There was a morning after a catastrophic test failure. Engines melted, metal twisted, years of work reduced to debris. It felt like gravity itself was trying to crush everything. Teams were demoralized. The air was thick with the unspoken possibility of giving up, and in that moment, this silent partner walked through the chaos with quiet composure. Not to fix, not to perform, just to stand beside the storm without being consumed by it. That morning taught me something profound. Stability doesn't always come from having the right answers. Sometimes, it comes from simply refusing to let fear dictate the next step. And that kind of strength, quiet, unwavering, unglamorous, can ripple through an entire organization like oxygen. People breathe again, brains start working again, possibility returns. There's a field of research in neuroscience called emotional contagion. It explains how emotional states can spread through groups like an invisible wave. One panicked voice can unravel a mission. One calm, grounded voice can hold it together. And over again, this silent partner was that voice. What fascinates me most is that none of this happened in the spotlight. No press releases, no cameras, no applause. Just a presence that shaped the course of events from the shadows. In a world obsessed with credit, this kind of power feels almost alien, but it's the foundation on which real revolutions are built. When I think about the early days, the near bankruptcies, the failures, the sleepless nights filled with both fire and fear, I remember how fragile everything was. People assume that greatness is inevitable, as if history was always going to bend this way. But it wasn't. It could have collapsed at any point. The difference between collapse and continuation was not luck. It was this partnership. You learn over time that brilliance alone doesn't sustain you. Not even vision does. What sustains you is emotional resilience. And emotional resilience is almost always reinforced through connection. Through having someone who doesn't flinch when you do. Someone who looks at the same storm and says, without needing to shout, "We'll keep going." There's something uniquely powerful about quiet strength. Because unlike loud, performative power, quiet strength doesn't need validation. It's not reactive. It's steady. It's the kind of strength that can stand beside genius without trying to compete with it. That's rare. In fact, it's one of the rarest forms of power in the world. And that's why this story matters. Because we tend to celebrate the wrong things. We celebrate visibility, noise, spectacle. But history is shaped by forces that are often invisible. Silent partners, steady anchors, quiet architects of possibility. We need to understand this, not just to give credit where it's due, but because it tells us something essential about how to build the future. If we build our dreams on isolated brilliance, we build on fragile ground. But if we build on steady partnerships, on human connection that can endure storms, we build on bedrock. One evening, I watched the sun set over the factory floor, the sky painted in fading fire. Teams were exhausted. The mission seemed impossible. And in the stillness of that moment, this partner simply placed a hand on my shoulder. No words, just presence. And in that silence, something shifted. My brain, which had been spinning at 1,000 revolutions per second, suddenly found center again. Sometimes, the most profound things are wordless. I've often wondered how many breakthroughs in human history were saved in moments like that. Quiet, unseen, unwitnessed by the world. How many revolutions lived or died based on one moment of shared calm? The world tells stories in headlines. But the real story lies between the headlines, in the human connections that hold everything together when no one's watching. And that's why I call this the untold story. Because this partner wasn't a headline. But they were the reason the headline ever existed. If you look closely at the biographies of every so-called lone genius, you'll find they were never truly alone. There was always someone behind the scenes, a mind that steadied theirs, a heart that believed when they couldn't, a partner who carried the invisible weight. This is something we, as a species, need to remember as we build the next chapters of our story. The great leap to other planets, the reinvention of energy systems, the merging of human intelligence with artificial intelligence. None of this will be carried by single individuals. It will be carried by networks, by trust, by silent partners who make the impossible survivable. When we speak about progress, we often use the language of machines, engines, rockets, algorithms. But the truth is, progress is profoundly human. It's built on nervous systems that either fall apart or hold together, on emotional bonds that either break or endure, on silent forces that don't need the light to shape the future. I want you to imagine something. A single hand holding steady in the dark, not pushing, not pulling, just holding. That's what this partner was. Not a shield from the storm, but a steady presence through it. And that, more than any technology, more than any fortune, more than any applause, is what changed everything. This story isn't about worshiping silence. It's about recognizing its power. Because if you understand this kind of power, you understand how to build something that lasts. You also begin to understand something else. That true greatness isn't loud. It's layered. It's built from the collision of vision and steadiness, of chaos and calm. The loudest part of any revolution is the explosion when it takes off. But what truly makes it fly is the quiet structure, holding everything in place beneath it. For years, I used to think that progress was about raw intellect. If we could just think big enough, design fast enough, build hard enough, we could bend reality. And while that's partly true, it's only a fraction of the real equation. What actually sustains progress isn't the explosion of ideas. It's the invisible infrastructure of human connection that keeps those ideas alive long enough to become reality. The silent partner in this story understood something that most people don't. That visionaries are often the loudest voices in the room, not because they crave attention, but because they're fighting the noise in their own minds. There's a certain kind of loneliness that comes with building something the world doesn't yet believe in. It's a quiet, sharp loneliness. You can have thousands of people around you, teams, investors, journalists, critics, but you can still feel like you're standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, and it's in that space where a silent partner becomes oxygen. This partner didn't try to be a second spotlight. They became the ground. And sometimes, that's what a human mind needs more than anything. Not someone to echo their voice, but someone to steady their shaking hands when no one's watching. When people speak of ambition, they often glorify fire. But I've learned to respect the water that keeps the fire from burning the dreamer alive. Without balance, ambition devours itself. But with the right balance, with a silent partner holding the emotional weight while you carry the dream, ambition becomes unstoppable. And here's the fascinating part: science supports this. Studies on co-regulation and emotional synchrony show that a single calm, trusted presence can reduce physiological stress markers in the brain. It lowers blood pressure. It stabilizes heart rate. It boosts working memory and executive function. In other words, it doesn't just make you feel better, it makes your brain work better. That's how a silent partner becomes a cognitive force multiplier. That's why, looking back, I don't think the rockets or the cars or the massive leaps forward were the hardest part. The hardest part was surviving the moments when everything seemed lost. And surviving those moments wasn't just about me. It was about us. About the presence that refused to let the dream collapse when it was most fragile. There's a kind of beauty in that kind of partnership. The kind that's never written about, never photographed, never awarded. It exists in the shadows, but it moves mountains. It doesn't demand gratitude, but it deserves it in every breath. People often ask, what's the secret to doing the impossible? Expecting a clever formula, a secret algorithm, a hack. But the real secret is far more human. It's who stands beside you in the silence, who remains when the applause stops, who holds the line when even you start to lose faith. I've seen incredibly intelligent people give up, not because they lacked talent, but because they didn't have anyone to help them hold the emotional weight of their vision. Dreams don't die because they're impossible. They die because they're too heavy for one mind to carry alone. This silent partner carried part of that weight. Not loudly, not publicly, but with a consistency that turned vulnerability into endurance. And that's something extraordinary. Because endurance isn't glamorous. It's not a headline. But it's what builds legacies. I want you to understand, truly understand, that when you strip away the glamour, the technology, the noise, every revolution is, at its core, a story of human beings. Nervous systems holding on to hope. People who believe in something they can't yet see. And among them, there's almost always one person who believes quietly, fiercely, unshakably. If you ever find that kind of partner, protect them. Not because they need protection, but because what they offer is rarer than any resource on Earth, more valuable than gold, more enduring than steel. They're the architecture beneath your dreams. There's a moment I'll never forget. A night when everything felt like it was ending. I was sitting on the floor of a room that smelled of metal and failure, surrounded by empty coffee cups and burnt-out plans. The silence was deafening. I remember saying, I can't see the way forward. And this partner, sitting beside me, replied with just 3 words, then we'll build it. That moment wasn't loud, but it changed everything. Because hope doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper that refuses to die. And in that whisper, the entire arc of the future can shift. Over time, I came to realize that history doesn't remember whispers, but whispers build the foundations of everything history remembers. That's what this silent partner was. Not a shadow behind the spotlight, but the foundation beneath it. There's a kind of strength that comes from being believed in when you don't believe in yourself. It sharpens your mind. It steadies your hands. It gives you the courage to face impossible odds, not because you're fearless, but because you're not alone. This is what I want every future innovator, scientist, leader, or dreamer to understand. If you want to build something truly extraordinary, don't just look for funding. Don't just look for talent. Find your silent partner, the one who doesn't need the world to see them in order to stand beside you. They won't always be recognized. History may never say their name, but their presence will echo in every breakthrough, in every launch that succeeds, in every wall you break through when everyone else thought it was the end. And to those who are silent partners themselves, to those who hold the line without applause, who keep hope alive without needing the light, know this: your role is not small, it's seismic. You are the gravity that keeps dreams from drifting into oblivion. You are the difference between almost and achieved, between imagined and real. The world may never fully understand the depth of your contribution, but those who stand at the edge of the impossible, they know. And their stories, whether spoken or unspoken, are built on the foundation of your unwavering presence. So yes, there will always be visionaries. There will always be bold voices, rockets, revolutions, impossible dreams. But for every loud voice that the world celebrates, there is a quiet one that made the celebration possible. And when the noise fades, when the history books close, when the headlines are forgotten, the quiet ones will remain, not in the spotlight, but in the structure of everything that was built. If there is a lesson to be learned from this story, it's this: greatness isn't a solo performance. It's a duet, a silent, powerful duet between those who dream and those who hold the dream steady. The future will not be built by noise alone. It will be built by presence, by partnership, by the quiet strength that refuses to break. So tonight, as I stand here, I don't want to celebrate the noise. I want to honor the silence, the steady heartbeat behind the roar, the untold story that lives beneath the surface of every great achievement. Because in the end, it was never just me. It was us, always us. And that is the real story. Thank you.